afternoon. I really appreciate everybody being here today. I know we'll have some other people continue to sign on, excuse me. I'm Robert Stiles. I'm the program director for KU Telehealth Rocks, and we really appreciate your ability to be here today. I know it's the end of the school year and things are very, very busy, but we really wanted to have a kickoff webinar before really dedicating ourselves over the next year to this topic. We know that throughout the pandemic and with everything that is going on in children's lives and in our collective life, we're seeing a lot more issues, but also a lot more work where we're asking teachers and school staff to handle more and more responsibility. And we heard a lot, this idea of self-care and resilience becoming sort of a bad word because of the idea that it's just one more task that people don't have the resources or the time for. So really want to think about approaches that can be taken to foster the learning process, which we understand, that's what school's about, that will deal with behaviors and can be used both by teachers and school staff, but also be used with students. Over the next year, we'll really focus a lot of attention and certainly hope this is sort of a kickoff webinar of some of the topics and to solicit sort of more feedback as we look at the next year and really begin to focus on that. Our real goal is this idea that we've lived through a lot, and we often talk in front of children or with children in terms of not seeing the opportunity in the situation. I've been talking a lot about how in the 2010s, we were talking a lot about the greatest generation, this generation that lived through World War II, and then the Great Depression, and then World War II, and how we see that generation as having resilience and strength, and having created the US as it is, and having, defeated the Nazis and had a very, successful lives that were engaged in their community and successful and created a strong country. And we really think there's an opportunity for that if we really think about how do we approach these techniques both for ourselves as well as with the children that we teach. I reflect a lot on how I've changed during the pandemic and the positive parts of my change during the pandemic, where my focus is and what's important. So really excited to begin this process and begin to have this conversation and really commit ourselves over the next year to focusing on these types of issues and this type of approach that's more about changing the focus in our approach and not asking for more work or setting aside something called self-care or resilience these techniques that have been talked about a lot that just become one more work duty that you don't have time for, that you don't have resources for, that we're not adding resources to what's available to increase those efforts. So just a few notes. The session's being recorded. We'll share it with you afterwards. Your microphone's been muted. You're welcome to unmute and ask questions or use the chat function on Zoom to talk. I appreciate you keeping your camera on if possible. We will be emailing out your completion certificates. And in order for us to know who is attended, so we can send those out, and you can use those for continuing education and other needs, please go in and make sure that you've changed your first and last name on the screen so we can identify you. You can just click on the three dots on your Zoom screen to add your name or to change your name. So I'd like to introduce our speakers for today, Stephanie Punt and Melissa Maris. Stephanie is a graduate student in clinical psychology PhD program here at KU Med, and at KU, and graduates next month. She's really interested in fostering a supportive community to help combat day-to-day stressors. She's worked with Telehealth Rocks for the last 3 years on different projects, including other echoes, and she has a background in how stressors can impact our physical health and how we think. Melissa Maris is a clinical community psychologist who works with schools and other youth-serving community organizations to improve mental health access and quality. She has extensive experience collaborating with schools and communities across Missouri and Kansas. She's worked with the Telehealth Rocks team for 2 years and on different projects, including our Echo Telementoring series. Now I'm going to hand off to Stephanie Punt to get us started with today's session. And thanks again for being here.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much everyone for being here. And just like what Robert said, we really want to help you just kind of cultivate, take what we have and really maximize our approaches to things. So really appreciate you all being here today, and definitely want this to be more of a discussion. It's kind of boring when we go into lecture mode. It's a lot more fun when it's interactive. So definitely, I know there's like 20 something of us online right now, but if you feel brave enough to either text in the chat or unmute yourself and ask questions along the way, definitely go for it. Overall, nothing to disclose, no financial agreements, that kind of stuff. Next slide, please. Again, just like what Robert said, and what Christy said too, that after this time together, we're going to make sure you have a copy of the slides, any resources that we talk about, and also your certificates. Next slide, please. So in terms of what's our roadmap look like for the next little bit less than an hour or so. So we're going to jump into some activities to kind of get to know you with just in terms of stressors. Social support is one of the key ingredients to helping combat stress. And so we want to create, even though we're all virtual and some of us have multiple people in a room, we want to help create a virtual kind of community of sorts that we can hopefully kind of carry through the summer and also into next year to really maximize our successes. So we'll jump into some getting to know you, just kind of activities together, go into about this webinar series, Ready to Learn. And I'll be talking to you about stress in biology, and then some top 5 practical ways to give your brain a break and really maximize your time. Next slide, please. All right, so our first activity is a word cloud. And the first question is going to be, what one word describes how your day is going so far?
If you'll go out in the chat, you can see the link and you can just click on that link and enter your words.
Definitely no right or wrong answer. We definitely appreciate everyone participating too. There's some great words in there. Yeah, so it looks like across all the responses that busy seems to be like the word that describes everyone's day. It's also challenging, right? Emotional, overwhelmed, competing needs. I think that really kind of encapsulates, right? Just all the different things they're trying to vie for our time. I think that's just an important way to kind of check in with ourselves and know that we're all kind of going through something similar right now too. All right. So good things to note. All right, how about the next word cloud, please? So what one word describes your summer plans, thinking about the future? Again, we definitely appreciate all your answers. I think it's neat to look at themes, and it seems like the top three, right? Family, sleep, fun, that these are all things we're looking forward to, right? In the summer, they're going to help us kind of hit the reset button too and take care of ourselves. I think that's neat to see that, we might have different ways of describing it, right? That they all kind of fit into those three different values or three different main categories. I think I really appreciate you participating in these. All right, next word cloud, please. We're halfway done with the word clouds, I promise. So if you could describe the last year with one word, what word would you choose? Again, thanks so much for, kind of adding in your own words too. But, again, it just really seems like, looking at the past year, that's really been exhausting and overwhelming for all of us. Here's also another consistent theme too of just our own experiences. And last word cloud, please. And thank you all for hanging in there. So in one word, what is a primary skill that you want to learn today? And again, thank you for adding in those words. And, I think just all those different word categories, right? Having that balance, being able to support others, how to help students focus on learning. I feel like that is the right. If we could just wave our magic wand and have kids focus on what's in front of them, that would be a whole, like a really neat skill to have. But I think hopefully with today and also with this series in general, we can, together create a community, like a virtual learning community, to be able to help work on those things together. Like, how do we maintain balance despite feeling overwhelmed in the moment? How can we help students focus on learning, right? Despite all these other stressors, access to different resources and those sorts of things. So I'm definitely really excited to, hopefully be able to address some of these today and also across the summer, asynchronously, and also into next year to really help support your successes. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing that. So we'll jump over to building a community.
Thanks, Stephanie. And hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be able to join you all today. And I really appreciate everyone participating so actively in the word clouds. I always find it helpful just to kind of have these sorts of check-ins with friends kind of in these types of situations, just as a way to kind of do a level set and figure out sort of where everyone is. We're going to walk through just pretty quickly kind of what our thoughts are in terms of why we framed this webinar series as building a community, and even kind of our title of Ready to Learn. And I think it will align really nicely with the language you all have generated in terms of kind of how you're feeling now, how this last year has been, kind of what's coming this summer, and then hopefully what's coming beyond that. So if we can go to the next slide. So why building a community? So we know from the research and our own personal experiences, of course, that social support is really important all the time. It's important when things are hard. It's important when there are things to celebrate. And we know that for stress in particular, that having social support is critical. It's part of kind of how we're baked in terms of our genetics of needing to have that social connection and the interpersonal dynamics. And what we have seen and the research shows is that having that social support actually changes our perception of stress. It can change our perception of how stressful something is, and then also can affect our perception of how able we are to cope with different stressors. And so social support being really critical. We also know that social support is an incredible protective factor around all sorts of things and generally contributes to positive mental health and physical health. So you all have seen the studies probably around how social support actually contributes to longevity in terms of lifespan, and then also quality of life throughout the lifespan. So having other people around us and having that supportive context is really, really critical. We're also excited about this idea of building a community so that we can have lots of opportunities to learn together and also to create opportunities we can learn from each other. We know that all of you all in kind of your own context, or if you're in the same context, have had lots of experiences over this last year and the last few years and before that of things that you have tried that have worked really well and things that you've tried that haven't worked so well, things that you're struggling with and in ways that you're really succeeding. And so we really do believe that having a broader community come together and talk specifically about these experiences and what we might be able to do moving forward, just to continue to support each other and do better ourselves in terms of coping and balance, is a really valuable kind of strategy. And we're hoping that today that this is really kind of the launch of what we can continue to build over the next year of a virtual community of learners to create those opportunities for social support. We recognize, I think some of you all are joining us in groups, and so that some of you all have that social support already in your organizational context. We also know that a number of friends are sometimes alone in their role in organizations. And so this can create a really nice opportunity just to reach out and connect to lots of different people in different places over the next year. So we are really excited to kind of talk to you about this today and sort of frame sort of our thinking around this topic. Next slide, please. And why ready to learn? So we had lots of conversation actually about how we can and should title this series. And we kind of landed on ready to learn for a lot of different reasons. Ready to learn in terms of thinking about how we as the grownups in a school building can help young people be in a better place and ready to learn, but also just recognizing that for ourselves, that we need to be doing lots of things in terms of our own kind of self-care, resilience strategies to make sure that we're also continuously ready to learn and translate that into how we interact with other people. We know that stress is kind of tricky, right? We need some stress to be able to perform at an optimal level. And we also know that too much stress or a prolonged duration of a lot of stress really impacts our ability to learn and absolutely impacts the ability of young people to learn and to benefit from anything that's happening in the school or in other community settings. When we are experience kind of that negative level of stress, There are real and kind of actual noticeable, and we can see them in scans, that impacts our brain, right? We don't learn as efficiently. We have a harder time taking in information. We have a harder time retaining that information. We have a harder time translating that information or generalizing it to other areas. And we also know that even though all of us end up in situations where we are multitasking, that the cognitive researchers have shown again and again that we are not nearly as good at multitasking as we think we are. And so that when we are multitasking, basically what we're doing is we're doing a lot of things, and we're not doing any of them very well. And one of the challenges, of course, with that idea of multitasking being that we actually derive a lot of satisfaction when we can do something and do it well. So that it's kind of this twofold challenge, right? We multitask, we're trying to get a lot of stuff done and trying to kind of maximize use of our time. And we end up actually not doing any of them terribly well, and we feel bad, which then makes it even harder. When we are really stressed, we are incredibly distractible. So our brain is actually more likely to find distractions in the context, and we're less able to kind of tune those things out. We do things like forget very easily. This is one of kind of the really clear indicators that we are experiencing too much stress, and it's actually having an impact on our cognitive functioning, is that things that we typically would remember, that we're noticing that it's really easy to forget. And certainly the same thing for young people. So if you are in a school context and have had this experience where you feel like you're saying the same thing over and over and over again, and that it just doesn't seem to be getting through, and that people are forgetting and young people are forgetting, this could actually be a function of how the brain is working, and that our kids are having a hard time taking in that information and certainly retaining that information. We know that when we're under a lot of stress, we get tired more easily. So our ability to do harder tasks actually decreases. And in general, all of this just lends itself to us getting pretty cranky and pretty grumpy. We're trying to do a lot of stuff. We're not doing any of it very well. And then we recognize that, and then we feel bad. And so then we are irritable and start, becoming moody. And so in terms of kind of this series for the next year, we really want to position ourselves to be supports to you, to be consultants in this work. We want to make ourselves available to problem solve, and really with the ultimate aim of finding something that will work for you in your context. We are big advocates that there are very few situations where there is one exact right answer, but rather that a lot of times we have to try several different things and kind of work through it to figure out what will eventually work. But that's the end goal, right? Is to kind of figure out some strategies that will help us and then help us in the classroom. And we also just want to recognize that in this conversation, you are the experts in your classrooms and in your local contexts. We feel like we bring some tools to the table, but also that those tools will only be as effective as we together can help them to be. And so this idea that we can take the same tool and kind of smush it around in lots of different ways until we figure out something that works. And in general, just that we want to help you all be as successful as possible next year and help the young people you're working with be as successful next year. And we have some ideas in terms of kind of some asynchronous content that we can share over the summer, and are open to having further conversation over the summer. And then for the next school year, scheduling out some more of these kinds of virtual conversations where we can talk about different strategies and again, engage in that kind of problem solving. So again, we're really, really glad you're here, and I will pass it back over to Stephanie.
Yay, thanks so much, Melissa. And just to reiterate too, that the purpose of this is to create a community that that there's other people with resources, and for us to help you kind of cobble some tools together, kind of mush things around for those different contexts. Definitely the goal is not to add more work to your plate. It's more the supportive capacity. So I definitely don't want anyone to read the potential of chats or other virtual groups coming up once the school year starts as an extra requirement, just more of we're here to really support you. Next slide, please. So let's talk about stress. You probably already know a lot about the biology of stress. We're going to go over that briefly today. Next slide, please. So this is an overwhelming image, and stress can be overwhelming. And you probably have seen something similar to this before, but I feel like for every single one of us, right, we're all in a different context. Our kids might all be in different contexts. Our classrooms are in different contexts. There's different local, national stressors going on. We have our own internal stressors that that can create its own kind of melting pot of the perfect storm of stressors that can then negatively impact us. Just like Melissa mentioned, there's lots of ways that we can that stress can be adaptive, right? Just for example, thinking about anytime that I've had to take a test, there's kind of that low key anxiety going on, right? I feel stressed out, but do I know the content or not? Sometimes if it's something that I kind of know, I still get kind of anxious or kind of feel, worried about am I going to pass the test or not. When I take the test though, I'm locked in, I can focus. In that sense, right? Stress was adaptive. It was helpful for me to focus and get stuff done. But if you ever think about, right, if we were back in school and had to take a test and it's like the night before we start cramming and then we realize our minds have become like Teflon and nothing wants to stick to it anymore. And then we start kind of, feeling crummy because we can't focus on anything. We can't, kind of take in that information that we're trying to take in. But it's kind of like that level, right, where the stress has kind of tipped the scales, become not so adaptive, and it's not functional, right? We didn't score that well on the test, even though it might be stuff that we already know about. So thinking about, right, just, with in terms of like thinking about like the kids in our classrooms or for us ourselves, right, that there's lots of different triggers and there's lots of different tools out there to kind of help with stress in the back end. That it's going to be different for all of us, and so kind of part of this platform is we want to hear about different tools that might work in different situations and help you kind of morph those tools into something that's useful for you. So like what we're saying too, right? So there's different stressful events from the external world. We can have our own internal stresses. Maybe we have a virus or something or a stomach bug. And then sometimes different stress triggers can make us think about other stressful events, maybe like taking that test and maybe we didn't do so well, right? So that kind of primes the pump for this perfect stress storm. Like Melissa mentioned too, right? That social support can be really protective against how these stressors can actually impact us. And meaning like how intense that stress response might be on the back end. And again, different stressors hit us in different ways. So it's just something to be aware of. And so again, too, right, stress when it becomes no longer adaptive can have lots of detrimental or negative impacts in terms of how we think, how we feel physiologically, right? There's tons of research out there showing that the more chronically stressed you are, right, the more cortisol there is, the more inflammation there is in your body long term, which can then lead to like cardiovascular disease, cancers, all those sorts of mean, nasty things that we don't want. So chronic stress can be super detrimental. Next slide, please. So in thinking about the biology again, right, if we were walking or going on a hike in the woods and we saw a bear, that stress response that kicks in is flight or fight, right? And that's an adaptive thing because if we saw something scary, we want to be able to run away from it, right? Be able to stay, to live another day, so to say. But imagine if, you constantly were on this hike and you kept seeing bears one after another, and then it's becoming no longer like the short-term thing, right? It's becoming like a chronic stressor. So if you think about just the way our work schedules are put together, the way there's kind of this, anticipated idea that we are always available all the time for, others, for the classroom, just there's not that delineation sometimes with the virtual world that, that bear, so to say, or that stressor is always going to be there. It's always there. And so that can really set us up for a chronic stressor or like a long-term stressor, which can then kind of flip on all the different signaling cascade things of, like cortisol or different stress hormones that get released that then upregulates all this inflammation because your body thinks, right, oh my gosh, I have to run away from a bear, except the bear is always sitting there next to me. So the more inflammation we have, our immune system can become impacted negatively. who become more susceptible to different illnesses. And when you look at different, like the cognitive sciences stuff, and look at people who have had chronic stress before and after a long chronic stress, you're looking at their brain scans, like actually your brain shrinks from chronic stress. Like the whole, we call the prefrontal cortex, or this entire front area that helps us make decisions, focus on tasks, that actually can shrink over time. The part that's responsible for memory, your hippocampus, that can actually shrink over time from prolonged stress. And so, there's lots of science behind it. Basically, like, the neurons are so stressed that they're not having the resources that they need, and they just stop firing as efficiently and can actually shrink. And I say it's not to scare us into like, oh my gosh, chronic stress is actively going to kill me, but more along the lines of, no, like stress is real, and it really, even though it can make us feel moody and irritable sometimes, it really can negatively impact us across the long term. So why these strategies and why kind of creating this social support community is so important is just, trying to help more protective factors, to add more protective factors into your toolbox to help combat against those stresses. We pick up stress across our lifetime too. So if you think about, any of the stressors that we've experienced growing up or adverse childhood experiences, that, not only is there a biological component, right? Genetically, we're set up to respond to things a certain way, but there's also kind of the social context and psychologically, or kind of how we saw other people in our home environment cope, or have difficulty coping with different things. That those stresses that we're exposed to early on, or just like the kids in our classroom can be exposed to early on, that can really impact how we perceive stress, how we translate stress, and how we kind of physiologically experience stress too. So despite, right, stress can have all these negative deleterious effects, that there are things that we can do to help control the impact that stress has on our body. So one is, you're here today and getting social support, right? Whether you have 25 people in the room with you right now, or just, you're sitting here on camera with us right now, that all counts as social support. And even though it might not seem like a huge thing, it's actually really protective against stress. Be able to take that time for yourself and know that you're not alone in this world and dealing with, feeling overwhelmed. From what everyone said in the word clouds too, right? That there's that busyness, and despite the busyness, that there's this hope for learning and balance and connection with others. And so hopefully kind of the skills that we work on together across time will help add to that as well. So we know that when stress increases, right, we can't think as well. Our ability to focus on something and then create a memory is diminished, right? Because if I'm constantly trying to focus on something, but I'm thinking about all the other things, or things are too stressful, my mind kind of turns into this Teflon situation, a nonstick pan. If I can't focus on the object or the information, I can't get it into my memory. And so then later, right, if someone's asking me, hey, Steph, like, did you do X, Y, and Z? If I wasn't able to focus on it and get to my memory, I won't be able to retrieve it as memory, right? Because the memory was never formed. So there's lots of routines that we can do, right? Or things that we can, strategies that we can do that helps decrease the cognitive effort required to get some things done. So really with these skills, we want to help you maximize kind of the resources and reserves that you have, such that you don't feel as, hopefully, as drained or tired by the end of the day. And so hopefully some of these strategies too will help translate into the classroom to kind of help our students or people in our community kind of help focus on more kind of practical things that we can do to decrease the amount that stress impacts us. And you probably have tried a lot of these different skills, but just kind of what Melissa alluded to too, is that sometimes for different contexts, you just have to kind of take a tool and kind of mush it around a little bit to see what fits better in that specific context. All right, next slide, please. So we're going to do a strategy together. I know this might be kind of awkward because we're all on camera. So for this portion, I will not judge if you want to turn your camera off and just listen. What we're going to do together is called progressive muscle relaxation. And I like this strategy because it's something that after you kind of get the hang of it, it's something that you can do, within 5 minutes or less. It doesn't have to be like this long half an hour dedicated time to it. You can do it for longer if you want. but it only takes a couple minutes. You can a lot of times do it in your chair, sitting at your desk, and a lot of people can't tell what you're doing either. So I think it's kind of cool in terms of like, if you're in a meeting, you feel like you want to use this strategy to kind of give yourself a break. A lot of people know that you're doing it. I've definitely have done it myself in different meetings. And at least no one's told me that they didn't catch me doing it. So, all right, next slide, please. Okay, so you probably have done something similar to this before. Basically what we're gonna do is together the next couple minutes, kind of go through different muscle groups. I'm gonna focus on more upper body. And what you're gonna do is that we're going to tense a muscle for about 5 seconds and then release it. And kind of like the purpose would be to, in terms of like what you're supposed to think about or that kind of stuff. One, there's no right or wrong way to think about things. It's just kind of, I like to start off with, but trying to just focus on only the action of breathing or tightening that muscle and relaxing it. And sometimes your mind's going to wander, and that's totally okay. Just to kind of gently nudge your mind back to like focusing on that muscle that you're trying to kind of tighten and relax, or focusing on your breathing. So, all right, we'll get into it. And again, you're more than welcome to turn cameras off if that is more comfortable for you. Okay. So first start by finding a comfortable position, sitting, laying down if you're by yourself, whatever feels most comfortable to you. And allow your attention to focus only on your body. If you begin to notice your mind starting to wander to other things, things that you have to do, or will do, or should have done, just gently bring your thoughts back to the muscles that we're going to work on. So first, take a deep breath through your abdomen. Hold it for a few seconds and exhale slowly. And as you breathe, just notice your stomach rising and your lungs filling with air, and your stomach collapsing as you breathe out. And with each inhale and exhale, imagine the tension in your body being released and flowing out with each breath. And again, inhale and exhale, and feel your body relax. So first, focusing on the muscles of your face. Tighten the muscles in your forehead by raising your eyebrows as high as you can. And release. Let the feeling of tension fall away. And go ahead and do that one more time, just raising all the muscles in your forehead by raising your eyebrows, holding it. And as you release, feeling all the tension melt away. Now smile widely, feeling your mouth and cheeks tense up. And then release, appreciating the tension leaving your face. Next, tighten your eye muscles by squinting your eyelids tightly shut. And as you release, feel the tension melt away from your eyelids. Next, tightly but without straining, clench your fists. And as you release, let the tension melt from your hands. Next, flex your biceps, feeling all the tension in your arms. And as you release your arms, let them feel relax and all the tension leaving your arms. And as you continue to breathe in and breathe out, shrug your shoulders close to your ears and release your shoulders, letting all the tension melt away. And next, tense your upper back by pulling your shoulders back, trying to make your shoulder blades touch. And as you release, let all the tension melt away from your back. And next, focus on your feet and start to wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers. And as you breathe in and breathe out, let all the tension leave your body. And rejoin us when you're ready. So I know that was a super quick version of progressive muscle relaxation, but I think it just kind of goes to show that you can really kind of make it your own and focus on the muscles that might tense up most for you. I know for me, sitting at a computer, I'm become computer shaped or chair shaped, and my hands are always kind of cramped up on the keyboard, and everything kind of ends up drifting this way. So I like to just focus on more of the upper body sometimes, especially when I'm at work or in a meeting, taking a second. And it doesn't have to be, again, like a huge, long, drawn out 30-minute, 40-minute progressive muscle relaxation, unless that's what you want to do and you have time for. But I think it's neat how it could really just be like, a 5-minute thing, 2-minute thing, right? Where you just kind of go through different muscles and kind of intentionally tighten and relax, just kind of visualize that tension leaving your body. Next slide, please. And so to kind of, after these types of strategies, I like to definitely check in with all of you. I know it's kind of hard because we have a bigger group of us and we're not in person, so you can't just kind of wave across the table and say, hey, how was that for you? But I think this is a nice opportunity to kind of check in with ourselves and just think about, right, take 15 seconds, like, how are you doing right now? Like in this moment. And again, no right or wrong way to answer that, but just to kind of think about, right, how are you doing right here, right now? Is that a strategy you've tried before? You probably have heard about it. Is that something you've done in your classroom? Or if there's other strategies that you personally like, or that you've found helpful, or that you find helpful kind of within your own context. And for, again, being with us during your coveted lunchtime. And I really enjoyed being able to meet with some of you in like a smaller platform to kind of get to know you and kind of what strategies you're using, and kind of like where some growth edges or some kind of things that we can hopefully kind of problem solve together. I don't know, Melissa, if you had anything that you wanted to add.
No, I think that was a good summary. We talked a little bit about different times that it might be that this kind of technique could be employed, and kind of the wide variation, right? So transitions, when someone is having a hard time, kind of transitioning in or out of kind of a calm space or a quiet room, kind of calm down corner. Yeah, it was also, just great to connect with everyone. It's good to see everybody.
Yeah, so hopefully we can keep the conversation going in future chats to, how best to help kind of provide resources to help you kind of within your context, or, just an example of like, right, like even if in some classrooms, for example, like there's, like dedicated kind of reflection time or chair yoga time for the kiddos, but like, right, how can we help the teachers be in a position to also participate in some of these things too, some of the same relaxation strategies. So I definitely hear you all in that comment. So let's see, next slide, please. Okay, so I want to leave you with something practical. And again, you probably have done a lot of these things yourself. And I'll just want to emphasize that giving yourself a brain break is hard to do, right? Because there's always that, if we're trying to multitask, we have all these different things vying for our attention at once. It's hard to be able to take that 15 seconds, right, to kind of check in with yourself and say, hey, how am I doing right now? Because your brain might be giving you a mixed signal saying like, right, like don't pause, you have work to do, right? There's no time for this. So these are just, in terms of thinking about the science behind it, we know that when we're stressed, we just don't think as efficiently. And there's, all the brain scans research really shows that too, that right, when stress becomes no longer adaptive and a chronic stressor, that we can't remember, we can't focus as efficiently. And so this is kind of when this is actually coming from more of like research even into like brain rehab and stuff like that, where individuals there's also like a maybe organic insult, right, to some area that's causing also just thinking issues. But in a sense, like all these stressors, we are kind of functioning at a level of someone who had a mild TBI or someone who has mild cognitive impairment. So these strategies can really, if we can just try to pick one at a time and kind of see, try them out, see how they work for us. They could actually help, give our brains a break from the stressors that we're encountering. So for example, taking a 15-second check-in, just once a week, or not even that, just when you remember to, if there's, say if you're in the car driving somewhere, just take that 15 seconds to kind of ask yourself, like, how am I doing right here, right now? Making a list, we know, to-do lists, grocery lists, those can all be helpful things just to kind of help organize what it is that you have to complete. Like for me, I like to make a to-do list. I make daily to-do lists. Sometimes I make more than one each day, but I try to order it in like, what's the easiest thing I can check off? Because I know for me, if I check off something easy, maybe it's like making coffee, right? That can count too. That really sets me up for feeling like, hey, I checked something off. I'm building this positive momentum throughout my day. With delegating a task, like sometimes, right, there's different asks that come up. So maybe it's, someone asking you to take on some more time to do another summer position, or to be the cheerleader coach, right? Or to have these additional responsibilities, and, really being able to take the time and figure out, like, is this something that makes sense for me to take on, or is this something that I could delegate to someone else? Because, with the idea that we really want to be able to protect our time and help maximize our time. So we can also take that time for ourselves too, and not just be running ourselves down with all these different things going on. Like I asked some of you about, in some of these strategies that you use in your classroom, right, is, like chair yoga is a part of a routine. And, some of you said, yeah, and it's neat because, right, for those kids who at 8 a.m., you have chair yoga, that's something that those kiddos can look forward to. And so kind of with ourselves too, maybe it's not chair yoga, but trying to think about something during the week that we can schedule that we find fun or that we could look forward to. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It could just be something like watching a Netflix thing on TV, or maybe it's listening to a podcast. And then lastly, when we are fatigued, we can't make decisions as well, and we can feel paralyzed when it comes to dinner or trying to figure out what to eat for a snack, and that can make us feel more irritable and grumpy. So being able to try a meal plan, at least one healthy meal or one healthy snack, can really help set us up for success throughout the day or the week. So those are our go-to kind of 5 practical brain breaks, ways to give yourself a break, kind of cognitively offload some things. I know we're just about, at our closing time. I definitely want to reiterate that we have, lots of resources for you. Those will be sent out also with this list as well. Are there any questions, comments? I don't know, Melissa, if you had other things you wanted to add.
No, I think that was great, Stephanie. Thank you so much. And just wanted to highlight, Robert popped a quick survey into the chat, and it would be really super helpful if you could fill that out. These questions are designed really to try to get input so that we can do better moving forward. So kind of different preferences and thoughts. And Teresa will make sure that you also have that link so that then you can share it with the other friends in your classroom. But we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. And absolutely, Mandy is pointing out making lists and using different colors, right? And so using different ink colors, adding highlighters. If any of you all have gotten into like bullet journaling or bullet lists, making different kinds of symbols. And again, it's not to try to make another hard thing that either you can't do or you don't do well enough, or all the shoulds. I should do better. Stop shoulding on yourself. Give yourself a break. But lists can be fantastic, right? And so making it colorful and fun, why not? And figuring out ways to make it work for you.
We promise the survey is only 5 questions max.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. And we really do plan to use this as we look at planning for next year and thinking about webinars and other resources next year. Please do the survey, because that'll tell us what you need and what's useful, and help us inform how to best provide assistance and support to you. So I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks again for coming. And like I said, we'll send out some things over the summer, some information and different things. Many of you are going to be with family and vacation and everything else, and we're glad you're getting that time, but want to continue to provide tips and other things. And then we'll be getting back to this in August and spending the next year on a lot of these efforts. So thank you so much for being here today, and I hope everyone has a great day.